Mr. Speaker, I shall use as much time as I consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
My name is Congressman Jim Costa from Fresno, California. And since I was first elected over 10 years ago, I have been member of the Blue Dog Caucus. This afternoon, members of the Blue Dog Caucus that stretch the width and the breadth of this great country of ours are going to speak about what brings us together, about the passions that they have and the people that they advocate for, and why they believe that their efforts as being a constructive and a very positive member of the Blue Dog Caucus adds value to their ability to represent their constituencies and to the vision that I think we as Americans all share together, which is to make our Congress, to make our representative democracy a more functioning system. Because clearly today, the American public, after poll after poll after poll, demonstrates their frustration with the inability of the United States Congress to come together and to work on common solutions for our country, solutions that share our common values, but also involve the art of the political compromise. Too often, I believe, an art that has become lost here in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. So among the first of the members of our caucus that will speak is a gentlewoman from Arizona's 9th District, a colleague of mine who always is advocating for her constituency in the most positive ways, Kirsten Sinema.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. And thank you today for organizing this special order. This is an important opportunity for us to come together and show how bipartisanship can fix our broken system. At I hear from everyone that Washington is broken. There's too much time spent playing political games and too little time spent working together to get things done. You know, most people are sick and tired of Congress failing to do its job because of partisan politics. And that's why I joined the Blue Dog Coalition, because they prioritize the people they represent more than their party leadership. Everybody knows that Congress is not working effectively, and the Blue Dogs are trying to change that. They're focused on ending political polarization, reforming Congress, stopping reckless government spending, and creating economic opportunity for Americans who've been left behind by this recession. I come to work every single day to get things done for Arizona, and I have a proven record of reaching out to members of both political parties to find common ground on issues ranging from jobs in the economy to reducing spending and government waste. And as a co-founder of the United Solutions Caucus and a no-labels problem solver, I worked with members of both parties to get things done. At home, Congressman Matt Salmon and I worked together to help Arizona veterans get the care they deserve. And I worked with Congressman Michael McCall to introduce legislation that puts an end to automatic pay raises for members of Congress. You know, neither party is always right. In fact, both parties are often wrong. And it's time for us to listen to each other and work together to grow our economy, help our country's families, and honor our veterans. Recently, we came together to pass bipartisan legislation to prevent veteran suicide and improve access to mental health care and health services for veterans. And just this week, we agreed on legislation to expand college savings plans and make higher education a reality for students and their families. We need more of these accomplishments in Congress. In Arizona, the voters established an independent redistricting commission that allows for a more open and transparent process that creates competitive districts where neither party has a monopoly. We Blue Dogs have proposed similar reforms to create impartial, fairly drawn districts across the country to cut back on the polarization that cripples our system. The American people deserve leaders who do whatever it takes to come up with practical and common sense solutions to help us move forward. It's time for us to focus on areas of common ground and come up with real answers to our country's most pressing problems. So let's put aside the finger pointing and the fighting. Let's roll up our sleeves and get back to work. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman from Arizona, and our next Blue Dog colleague who will speak is a gentleman who I have served with both in California state legislature as well as here in Congress. He and I are good friends. We both represent wonderful parts of California, and he is one of the longer serving members of the Blue Dog Caucus. The gentleman from Northern California, Congressman Mike Thompson from California's 5th District.
I thank the gentleman and my friend for yielding. And Mr. Speaker and members, I came down to the floor this afternoon to join my Blue Dog colleagues in calling for all of us in Congress to come together and do the work that we've been asked to do, the work that we've been sent to Washington, sent to Congress to do on behalf of the people that we represent. I came to Congress to get things done for the people that I represent, and to get things done for the great country that we're all so privileged to live and to participate in. As Mr. Costa mentioned, he and I served together in the state legislature in California. And I'm very proud of the work that we did there. We were able to get a lot of things done. At the time that I was there, the majority of the time, I chaired the Senate Budget Committee. And that was one of the reasons why I was so proud to be a Blue Dog. The common thread that holds all Blue Dogs together is the issue of fiscal responsibility. In my time in Sacramento, chairing the Budget Committee, we always had a balanced budget. Fiscal responsibility was important, and it's equally as important here in Congress. Nobody likes the fact that we have huge deficits or huge debts. We understand that some things are unavoidable, but there has to be an understanding of and an intentional effort on the part of all of us to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and that we manage that debt and we manage that deficit and we bring it down to a level that won't burden our children and our grandchildren in the years to come. And so I was stunned when I came to Congress and found out that it was very, very difficult to get anything done, to get people to work together. And as Jim pointed out, I'm one of the longer serving members, so I was stunned a long time ago in what you can probably refer to today as the good old days, when we were actually able to work together and get things done. But we didn't have a high level of that cooperation even back then. Last week, I was with the Aspen Institute on a trade conference, and anybody who's familiar with them knows that they're able to bring together a bipartisan and bicameral representation of Congress, members from the Senate, members from the House, Democrats and Republicans. And they also bring together some of the most famous scholars to talk about whatever the issue of the conference. And I was struck at this trade conference when one of the new members that we serve with, of now starting his sophomore term, after the scholars spoke and he was recognized, he said, "I came to Congress to involve myself in this type of problem solving. When people came together, talked about issues, talked about problems, and talked about solutions." He said, and this is the first time since I've been here that we've been able to engage in that type of dialogue. And that's not right, members, and we all know that. We're here to work on the problems that face our great country, and we need to get down and do that work.
Would the gentleman yield?
Pardon me?
Would the gentleman yield?
Be happy to yield.
I appreciate your explaining your experience in the California legislature, because we not only work together in a bipartisan fashion, but we also work together with the lower house and the state Senate, because you could never get anything done if you didn't work together with both houses. And of course, that's part of our problem here today.
Reclaiming my time, the gentleman is correct. That's how the legislative process works. You don't just punt something over to the other chamber and then say, we've done our job, because you haven't done your job until the president, in the case of Congress, signs his name on the line, making that bill or that job come to fruition, making it the law. And you're right, in the state capitol, we did that. We knew we had to work together because the same piece of legislation had to pass both houses and had to meet for the governor's signature in order to become law, and the same thing happens here. And I know it can be done. One of the things that I did in some of my earlier years here, successful in getting a wilderness bill passed, that wilderness bill that protected into perpetuity 350,000 acres in my district in California. And wilderness bills have passed before, so that in itself is not the biggest thing that's ever happened here. But I'm particularly proud because I was in the minority then. The chair of the natural resources was Richard Pombo from California, someone who I consider a friend, although not a political ally. And he was not someone who was favorable to approving wilderness legislation. But I worked with him and his committee. He had the bill up in for a markup. We had it on the floor. We passed it. I compromised. He compromised. That bill went through the House. The companion bill went through the Senate, as Mr. Costa was explaining, it has to be done. And it went to then President George W. Bush, who signed it into law. So it's incongruent with the way we work today. Today, you would just start by saying, an unfriendly chairman, an unfriendly president, we can't get anything done, and that is just absolutely not true. If we come together, if we work together, we can find solutions to the problems that we face. And there's any number of issues that need to come together, need to be put on this floor for a vote. You can look at immigration reform, tax reform, gun violence prevention, and certainly one that everybody can agree with is an infrastructure bill. There's not a person that any one of us represents who doesn't know that we need to invest in America's infrastructure, in our roads, in our highways, in our broadband, in our overpasses, in our bridges. And now with the new Panama Canal coming online and the bigger ships coming into this country, we have huge investments that need to be made in our ports and our harbors. These are investments that not only put Americans to work, generating more revenue, but put better jobs and make our economy stronger than it's ever been before. I submit, members, that these are things that we can do. As has been said before, the things that bring us together, the things that bring us together as Americans are far greater than the things that divide us. And I will plead, let's get together, let's roll up our sleeves, let's work together on addressing the major issues that face America. I thank you, Mr. Costa, for bringing us here today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, I thank the congressman from California, Congressman Mike Thompson, I think expressly indicated why he's a blue dog, and over the years his efforts to bridge the gap, to reach across the aisle, to get something done, because he recognizes, as do all of us blue dogs, that the political dysfunction that is occurring here in our nation's capital is real. It has measurable costs, and it's preventing our country, sadly, from solving the problems that our constituents send us here to solve, whether it's the economic recovery that could be stronger, whether it's fixing our nation's deficit, whether it's fixing a broken immigration system, or an array of other issues that are pressing, that are important to the people back home. The next gentleman who would like to address our Congress is a colleague of ours from the great state of Illinois, my colleague and classmate, Congressman Dan Lipinski from Illinois' 3rd District.
Well, thank you, Mr. Costa, for putting this together today. The reason I came to Congress, the reason I ran for Congress, was to get things done. I think that's what all our constituents are expecting us to do. Unfortunately, when I'm at home, I'm constantly reminded that my constituents are wondering why we don't get more done. What's happening in Washington? When I'm shopping at Menards or at Jewel, people come up to me and say, why can't everyone work together there in Washington? They know that I've been doing that. And that's why I'm part of the Blue Dog Coalition, because we want to bring people together here in Washington, in the House, the Senate, bring everyone together to work out the many, many problems that our nation has. We just had Mr. Thompson talking about a transportation bill. Everyone talks about the need to fix our transportation infrastructure. We have roads and bridges that are crumbling. Our public transit also has infrastructure that's crumbling. We all need a good transportation system to get wherever we need to go during the day. Our nation, for the sake of having an efficient economy, needs a good transportation system. We can put people to work immediately fixing our transportation system, yet we haven't been able to come together to solve this problem. That's one thing that we need to do, and it's something I think that we can do. We've just seen all the trouble that we run into here with the Homeland Security bill, an issue that should be easy. We all want to protect our homeland. We all know that the threats that we are facing. And although we have disagreements, many issues, protecting our nation is not one of those. Yet, unfortunately, we do run into issues, and we really need to instead focus on what can we work together on and what is possible. We have divided government now. It used to be that after an election that everyone would come together, look around and say, okay, this is who's the majority in the House, the majority in the Senate, who's in the White House. What can we agree upon? How could we work together to solve problems? Where can we find our agreements? Instead, we seem to focus on how can our party get control of everything in the next election. Mr. Speaker, this is not the way that the American people want us to work. They want us to come together. Now, as some of the previous speakers that talked about electoral reform, redistricting reform, those can certainly help, and those are things that we support and that the Blue Dogs are working to get done. But even before we get those things done, we can work together and accomplish great things here. The American people are demanding that of us. They're demanding that we change the way that Washington is working right now, and that's what the Blue Dogs are doing. That's the only way we're going to be able to face so many of the problems that we face, including the issue that is really at the heart of the Blue Dogs, has always been, continues to be, is dealing with our fiscal situation. We need to be fiscally responsible. The American people understand this. They know we need to make the tough choices here in Washington to get our fiscal house in order. The Blue Dogs have always led on that. We continue to lead on that. But it's going to take bipartisan cooperation to get that done because we have divided government. But we need to do it. We need to take care of these issues. And the Blue Dogs continue to work on these things, and we really need the support of everyone to come together here in Washington, across the country, to solve these great problems that we have, that we face. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure there's people who may be out there watching this on C-SPAN, and probably a lot of people who are just so happy to finally hear, turn on C-SPAN and hear people talking about working together, not talking about what's wrong with the other side, how I'm right and the other side's wrong, but the need to work together. That's what the Blue Dogs are about. That's what we continue to be about, and that is the way that we are going to make America the greatest nation on the face of the earth, but a nation that faces, as we all understand, many issues, many problems, just as our families are facing many issues right now. But by working together, we can make our nation even greater, and only by working together will we get there. I'm very happy to join my Blue Dog colleagues here tonight and every day working to help make America a better place to live. So let us all come together, Mr. Speaker, and work on some of these problems. Compromise. I know it's sometimes a dirty word. You don't have to give up your principles to compromise. Principles, but compromise, get done what we can get done, and make this nation a greater place. I thank my Blue Dog colleagues very much. Thank you, Mr. Costa, for this. And we can continue to bring the message to the American people and get things done.
I want to thank the gentleman from Illinois, my classmate, for his good words. Clearly, I think he speaks on behalf of not only the Blue Dogs, but the majority of Americans who believe that we need to be working together to solve problems, whether it's our budget, our fiscal deficit, or whether it's our transportation system, as the gentleman from Illinois so succinctly pointed out. It can never be my way or the highway, because if that is the case, we will never get anything done, as has been witnessed here for the last couple of months. But when we do work together, as the compromise bipartisan vote that we saw this afternoon on Homeland Security, we can get something done. My next friend and colleague is the representative from Georgia's 2nd District, Congressman Sanford Bishop. He has distinguished himself over the years and has been a member of not only the Blue Dog Caucus, but he represents some of the best parts of Georgia, Fort Benning, and agriculture like I represent. And Sanford, we're glad to have you here this afternoon to tell us the thoughts of the people of Georgia's 2nd District on the terrific job you do on their behalf.
I thank the gentleman for pulling together this special order, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that ultimately a genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. Debate is a natural consequence of a representative democracy. Gridlock, on the other hand, is not. Sitting down with those across the aisle is not just an act of placing faith in political and ideological adversaries, but an act of placing faith in our egalitarian democratic system, a system as it was founded on the art of creating consensus in order to move forward. All of us here speaking from the well this hour believe in working together for better government, working for responsible government, working for transparent government. The moderate Blue Dogs are here not only to find common ground between lawmakers, but to forge an understanding of what it is to truly work together. The Blue Dog Coalition is dedicated to a core set of beliefs that transcend partisan politics. We represent the center of the House of Representatives and appeal to the mainstream values of the American public. The coalition develops substantive proposals and positions distinct from those advocated by the extremes in both parties. Needless to say, we Blue Dogs are less swayed by the leadership of either party and more persuaded by the needs and the concerns of mainstream Americans. But this is nothing new. 20 years ago, the Blue Dog Coalition was formed following the 1994 election. Over the past 20 years, many of our proposals have been praised as fair, responsible, and positive additions to a congressional environment too often marked as partisan and antagonistic. Throughout those years, the Blue Dogs have been dedicated to solving problems based on 5 principles of political leadership. Tell the truth, govern for the future, put the country first, be responsible, work together. My job is to represent the interests and the values of the people in my district in Middle and Southwest Georgia. As a Blue Dog Democrat, I push for common sense measures that will make government work better for my constituents. The people of Georgia's 2nd Congressional District, like all Americans, deserve a government that puts their needs ahead of partisan politics. We seek to use the legislative process to create a higher, better quality of life for all of our citizens. Eliminating government waste and efficiency are crucial to achieving this goal. We work with our colleagues on the right and the left, on both sides of the aisle, to pass common sense reforms that will make government work for the people of our great nation. As members of Congress, it's our responsibility to ensure that government works for the American people. I'm committed to working together with my colleagues to pass legislation that eliminates federal waste and inefficiency. If we can do this, it will give us a better chance at getting things done. And that's how we rebuild trust with the American people, by showing them that we are doing the job we were sent here to do. Today, many folks might suppose that bipartisanship is dead. The Blue Dogs have been here and are still here to say that it's not dead. We are committed to working, not to finger point, not to fight, but to fix. And I believe that problem solving together across both sides of the aisle, we can make that happen. And so I'm delighted that my colleague, Mr. Costa, and my colleagues from the Blue Dog Coalition have come together with this special order so that we can say to each other, say to the American people, cry out for a government that will work for the people to get the needs, their common goals, their common hopes, and their common aspirations addressed. We may have differences, but we have more similarities than we have differences. And if we find those common denominators of experience that combine us, we can get the job done for the American people. And so I thank you for this time.
Congressman Bishop, my friend, I could not have said it better. For the people and by the people.
The gentleman from California will suspend for one moment. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, messages from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker, I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives messages in writing.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. For those who are watching on C-SPAN this afternoon, we welcome your input. We welcome your comments. And for those of you who are interested, please sign on to our website, www.bluedogschrader.house.gov. Is a way in which you can communicate to us. We all have our websites. Obviously, not only our constituents from our respective districts, but people from throughout the country. We would urge you to weigh in. Let us know how you feel. Which is appropriate segue for our next speaker. The Blue Dogs have every 2 years select 3 leaders to represent them and to organize our agenda. We have a policy individual who will be speaking in a moment, Congressman Jim Cooper. We have the communications director, which is the position I serve, and then we have our chairperson. Our chairperson is a gentleman who I have the honor and the privilege to serve with. He is my friend. He is doing an excellent job. The gentleman from Oregon's 5th District, Representative Kurt Schrader.
Thank you very, very much. I want to thank my friend, the gentleman from California, for hosting this particular special order. I think it's important for America to realize that we all don't hate one another. We actually get along pretty well on a personal level, and there are those of us on both sides of the aisle that want to work together to solve our country's problems. You've heard a little bit about that already. I think at this time, more than ever, it's important for Congress to come together. The little debate we had last week and a half on the Department of Homeland Security, I think, drives that point home. Oftentimes, within families, there's disagreements, whether it's a Republican family or a Democratic family. We're not going to agree on all the issues all the time. That doesn't make one side wrong and the other side right. What it does mean there's an honest difference of opinion. The way our forefathers set the system up, we're supposed to work through that. There are checks and balances. No one party, no one chamber, no one individual is supposed to have ultimate veto over the rights of everyday Main Street Americans. So what we in the Blue Dog Coalition try to do is bridge those differences, provide a forum to find ways to agree, not disagree, with the other team. the Homeland Security bill, whatever you think about some of the attachments to the bill or some of the actions by the President of the United States, you know, it's important to fund Homeland Security more now than ever. The stuff that's going on overseas that could possibly threaten our own shores makes it imperative that we work together. I'm actually proud, despite the sausage-making look of it in the media and perhaps to a lot of Americans, that it was Republicans and Democrats that came together to solve that problem. We live to fight another day on reform and some of the other issues we have genuine, legitimate differences of opinion on. But it should not be lost on the American people that it was Democrats and Republicans coming together to solve a very basic problem that our Congress and nation are charged to do, which is provide for the security of the American people. The Blue Dogs have been doing this for years. You've heard, our inception after the 1994 elections when Blue Dogs felt we were getting choked. We're regular Southern Democrats, if you will, at that time. It's branched out, like Mr. Costa's indicated, to include the whole country now. But Yellow Dog Democrats are getting choked blue by their rather liberal leadership that they felt did not respect or, frankly, represent some of their interests. And out of that came the Blue Dogs. The body has grown and decreased in numbers with every election cycle. There has been a consistent drumbeat, however, for folks like us, moderate districts, not just on the Democratic side, but on the Republican side. We actually have quarterly meetings with a Republican group called the Tuesday Group, where we try and get together and share ideas about things we can work together on. Not in opposition to, but work together on. Boy, I wish leadership would work in that same vein. We'd be a lot better off.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, I will.
Congressman Schrader, we've talked a lot about this among our fellow Blue Dogs, but I think the point that you raised there is worth repeating because, frankly, I think there are a lot of members on both sides of the aisle, if they had the opportunity, would like to figure out how they could work together. And I know as the chair of the Blue Dog Caucus, it's your desire to reach out and continue to make that effort. And I just want to applaud you for that. But I also want to ask, are there other ways in which constituents can make their congresspeople feel more comfortable about doing that? This notion that it's my way or the highway, I think the majority of my constituents, they wonder, what's going on there? I mean, what are you folks thinking in Washington? Because that's not the way we do it at home.
Well, reclaiming my time, I totally agree with the gentleman from California. I think there are sometimes that bubble we operate here in Washington, D.C. We forget that the people back home, frankly, are sometimes not watching C-SPAN. They're busy trying to put food on the table, see if their kid can get a great education. Frankly, in recent times, just keep their bloody job. So I think it's important for us to relate to the people that are paying our salaries. This is their chamber. This is their building, not a bubble of Washington, D.C. types. This is important for us to sit down and represent what they're talking about. When I go home this last election cycle, and frankly every election cycle, the big issue for Americans in Congressional 5th District and great state of Oregon, Willamette Valley, Central Oregon Coast, it's not any one issue. It's will you please work together. I mean, this is complicated stuff. Some of these bills are pretty darn complicated. But I think everyday Americans understand, okay, that's why I hired you. Work it out. Figure it out. And to their credit, they don't give me a lot of excuses. Well, gee, I'm not in the majority. I don't control. Kurt, I elected you. I want you to figure out how a way to work with folks. And we can do that. The Farm Bill, last Congress, is a classic example where we actually worked together, Republicans and Democrats. You could not tell a Democrat or Republican based on what they were talking about because they were representing different districts, different geographies around this country, lobbying hard for their farming interests or nutritional programs that they felt passionately about. That's the way Congress is supposed to work. That's what the Blue Dog Coalition is all about, building those relationships. If you notice, in the 114th Congress, in the first 2 months, while DHS, the Affordable Care Act, sometimes choice or abortion gets a lot of the headlines from the media, I'd urge you to look at the votes for the big important bills that came forward. There are a number of bills that leadership, and I give the Republican leadership credit for this, they brought forward that moderate Democrats had voted for in past Congresses or expressed interest in. And they got overwhelming and sometimes significant Democrat support. That's not talked about by the media, folks, but you got to realize that there are many opportunities like that that go below the radar screen. Maybe it may not be the sexiest topic in the world, but stuff like making sure the Affordable Care Act works, making sure that small businesses are able to function properly, making sure that the Dodd-Frank financial reform actually is workable and respects the interests of the different members of the community out there, even the Keystone vote. I mean, we have to be thoughtful about it, and Democrats and Republicans need to work together, find areas you can agree on, and we have tried to do that time and again. It's the heartbeat of the Blue Dog Coalition. Basically, what we're standing for, as you've heard, is fiscal reform, fiscal responsibility. Been a hallmark of Blue Dogs over the last 20 years. We're generally a government efficiency organization. We believe government's not evil, but it could sure work a heck of a lot better. Every one of the folks out there in America understands that some government rule is making a problem for them. It shouldn't have to happen. We, as Blue Dogs, try and cut through that government regulation. We're also business friendly. Yeah, Democrats can be business friendly, believe it or not. They're called Blue Dogs. There's another group called New Democrats. There's another group growing outside this that wants to include all Americans called No Labels. And most Blue Dogs are, frankly, members of No Labels. There's another group that works together, Democrats and Republicans. Yeah, folks, there's a lot of different people in this Congress very interested in trying to work together. Congress work and deal with your lunch bucket issues that mean the most to you. Job creation, educational reform, infrastructure, as was alluded to. These are values I think every American holds dear. And those are the issues we should be working on. Senator Lieberman said at one point it's kind of ironic that, everyone's interested in bipartisanship, but if you don't agree with somebody 100% of the time, you don't agree with them any of the time. Well, the real world is life is complicated, and you're going to have times when you agree, times when you disagree. One of the basic axioms of politics is you don't have enemies or friends, you have allies and adversaries at the end of the day, because issues change. Issues change over time, and you'll find that the ebb and flow of interest will conflate with party, geography. It's an imperative that we work together. I'm actually proud, despite the sausage-making look of it in the media and perhaps to a lot of Americans, that it was Republicans and Democrats that came together to solve that problem. We live to fight another day on reform and some of the other issues we have genuine, legitimate differences of opinion on. But it should not be lost on the American people that it was Democrats and Republicans coming together to solve a very basic problem that our Congress and nation are charged to do, which is provide for the security of the American people. The Blue Dogs have been doing this for years. You've heard, our inception after the 1994 elections when Blue Dogs felt we were getting choked. We're regular Southern Democrats, if you will, at that time. It's branched out, like Mr. Costa's indicated, to include the whole country now. But Yellow Dog Democrats are getting choked blue by their rather liberal leadership that they felt did not respect or, frankly, represent some of their interests. And out of that came the Blue Dogs. The body has grown and decreased in numbers with every election cycle. There has been a consistent drumbeat, however, for folks like us, moderate districts, not just on the Democratic side, but on the Republican side. We actually have quarterly meetings with a Republican group called the Tuesday Group, where we try and get together and share ideas about things we can work together on. Not in opposition to, but work together on. Boy, I wish leadership would work in that same vein. We'd be a lot better off.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, I will.
Congressman Schrader, we've talked a lot about this among our fellow Blue Dogs, but I think the point that you raised there is worth repeating because, frankly, I think there are a lot of members on both sides of the aisle, if they had the opportunity, would like to figure out how they could work together. And I know as the chair of the Blue Dog Caucus, it's your desire to reach out and continue to make that effort. And I just want to applaud you for that. But I also want to ask, are there other ways in which constituents can make their congresspeople feel more comfortable about doing that? This notion that it's my way or the highway, I think the majority of my constituents, they wonder, what's going on there? I mean, what are you folks thinking in Washington? Because that's not the way we do it at home.
Well, reclaiming my time, I totally agree with the gentleman from California. I think there are sometimes that bubble we operate here in Washington, D.C. We forget that the people back home, frankly, are sometimes not watching C-SPAN. They're busy trying to put food on the table, see if their kid can get a great education. Frankly, in recent times, just keep their bloody job. So I think it's important for us to relate to the people that are paying our salaries. This is their chamber. This is their building, not a bubble of Washington, D.C. types. This is important for us to sit down and represent what they're talking about. When I go home this last election cycle, and frankly every election cycle, the big issue for Americans in Congressional 5th District and great state of Oregon, Willamette Valley, Central Oregon Coast, it's not any one issue. It's will you please work together. I mean, this is complicated stuff. Some of these bills are pretty darn complicated. But I think everyday Americans understand, okay, that's why I hired you. Work it out. Figure it out. And to their credit, they don't give me a lot of excuses. Well, gee, I'm not in the majority. I don't control. Kurt, I elected you. I want you to figure out how to a way to work with folks. And we can do that. The Farm Bill, last Congress, is a classic example where we actually work together, Republicans and Democrats. You could not tell a Democrat or Republican based on what they were talking about because they were representing different districts, different geographies around this country, lobbying hard for their farming interests or nutritional programs that they felt passionately about. That's the way Congress is supposed to work. That's what the Blue Dog Coalition is all about, building those relationships. If you notice, in the 114th Congress, in the first 2 months, while DHS, the Affordable Care Act, sometimes choice or abortion gets a lot of the headlines from the media, I'd urge you to look at the votes for the big important bills that came forward. There are a number of bills that leadership, and I give the Republican leadership credit for this, they brought forward that moderate Democrats had voted for in past Congresses or expressed interest in. And they got overwhelming and sometimes significant Democrat support. That's not talked about by the media, folks, but you got to realize that there are many opportunities like that that go below the radar screen. Maybe it may not be the sexiest topic in the world, but stuff like making sure the Affordable Care Act works, making sure that small businesses are able to function properly, making sure that the Dodd-Frank financial reform actually is workable and respects the interests of the different members of the community out there, even the Keystone vote. I mean, we have to be thoughtful about it, and Democrats and Republicans need to work together. Find areas you can agree on. We have tried to do that time and again. It's the heartbeat of the Blue Dog Coalition. Basically, what we're standing for, as you've heard, is fiscal reform, fiscal responsibility. Been a hallmark of Blue Dogs over the last 20 years. We're generally a government efficiency organization. We believe government's not evil, but it could sure work a heck of a lot better. Every one of the folks out there in America understands that some government rule is making a problem for them. It shouldn't have to happen. We, as Blue Dogs, try and cut through that government regulation. We're also business friendly. Yeah, Democrats can be business friendly, believe it or not. They're called Blue Dogs. There's another group called New Democrats. There's another group growing outside this that wants to include all Americans called No Labels. And most Blue Dogs are, frankly, members of No Labels. There's another group that works together, Democrats and Republicans. Yeah, folks, there's a lot of different people in this Congress very interested in trying to work together. Congress work and deal with your lunch bucket issues that mean the most to you. Job creation, educational reform, infrastructure, as was alluded to. These are values I think every American holds dear. And those are the issues we should be working on. Senator Lieberman said at one point, it's kind of ironic that, everyone's interested in bipartisanship, but if you don't agree with somebody 100% of the time, you don't agree with them any of the time. Well, the real world is life is complicated, and you're going to have times when you agree, times when you disagree. One of the basic axioms of politics is you don't have enemies or friends, you have allies and adversaries at the end of the day, because issues change. Issues change over time, and you'll find that the ebb and flow of interests will conflate with party, geography, all those issues. The Blue Dog Coalition is dedicated to trying to bring people together across this country, Republicans and Democrats, business interests, individuals, trying to make your government more responsible, more efficient. electoral reform, congressional reform, getting back in this great august chamber to regular order, to where your interests are represented through the committees, through the elected representatives you have. That's what's important here. And that binds Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, and moderates like us. That's the hallmark of the Blue Dog Coalition. Well, I won't belabor the point. I thank the gentleman for bringing us to the floor here. I think it's important for America to be a little inspired that there are people that care about this country, cut through the partisan politics, even go against our respective leaderships to try and solve the problems you want us to solve. I think at the end of the day, that's where America is. And to get back to a greatness that was alluded to before, it's going to require more members of the Blue Dog Coalition, the Tuesday group on the other side of the aisle, to be elected to Congress. I hope America gets mad as hell and starts to hold their members accountable for working together and making America great again. With that, I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman from Oregon for your leadership as the chair of the Blue Dog Coalition. Your efforts to reach out to the Tuesday group, to No Labels caucus, your efforts to take difficult positions and cast hard votes, I think are all examples of political profiles and courage, and we commend you for your leadership and your efforts. The next Blue Dog Coalition member who will speak is one of our newest members. He yields from the great state of Nebraska. We are honored to have him as one of our newest members of the Blue Dog Coalition, Brad Ashford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We appreciate the authority's efforts with the Rules Committee notice. And once again, I'd like to reintroduce my colleague, one of our newest members of the Blue Dog Coalition, a gentleman who distinguishes himself from Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. A lot of agriculture and a lot of good people. Congressman Brad Ashford has the opportunity to represent, and we appreciate the fact that you're here.
Thank you, Mr. To speak today. You mentioned just briefly the concept of profiles of courage. And John Kennedy, in writing that book, wrote about a great Nebraskan, George Norris. George Norris was a senator from Nebraska. Prior to that time, he served in this House. And in 1908, he led a bipartisan effort in the House to change the rules of the House to make the House more transparent and more accountable to the American people. And in that regard, John Kennedy, in his book, wrote about Congressman Norris and then subsequently Senator Norris. And in the 1930s, Senator Norris, who had worked to create the Tennessee Valley Authority, who had worked across the aisle with FDR, he was a Republican, with FDR to pass the Rural Electrification Act that electrified the country. He did so working across the aisle. And in the 1930s, in 1934 specifically, he reached out to the people of Nebraska and said, we can have transparent government, we can have a bipartisan, nonpartisan government that will address the tough issues of Nebraska of the 1930s. And he recommended to the voters, look, let's do this. Let's have a unicameral, nonpartisan legislature. And the lobbyists and the special interests said, look it, George, you should go back to Washington. This isn't going to work in Nebraska. Well, the voters of Nebraska in 1934 voted for a unicameral, nonpartisan legislature. And I'm proud to say that we have such a legislature today. I am so proud and honored to be here. And there was a discussion earlier by prior speakers about relationships. And what's so interesting to me and amazing to me, not amazing really, but gratifying, are those relationships. The relationships that I've been able to achieved through my association with the Blue Dogs and relationships with Republicans and Democrats alike. It's very, very gratifying that that exists. That's what I'm used to in Nebraska. When I first arrived here, I went to a Democratic caucus. I served in the Nebraska unicameral legislature for 16 years. I never went to a caucus in my life. I didn't really know exactly what a Democrat and Republican really was. I didn't know. I suppose I'd have to look. But of the 49 members of the Nebraska legislature, I'd have to think long and hard about what party they belonged to. And in the 16 years that I served there, we had many tough issues. In fact, one of the toughest issues that we had in our state was the pipeline issue, and that was referenced earlier, the Trans-Canada Pipeline. Well, it goes through Nebraska. And when it, as originally routed, it would have gone through some of the most sensitive areas, the Sand Hills area and the Ogallala Aquifer. Well, we spent a year together, the 49 of us. Not every day. Not every day. We'd kill each other if we spent every day together. But we spent a lot of time. And at the end of the day, we came up with a process to reroute the Trans-Canada Pipeline, to take it away from to move it away from the most sensitive parts of the Ogallala Aquifer. We did it with a vote of 49-0. 49-0. Environmentalists, those on the other side of the issue, coming together to pass a routing bill. So the idea that George Norris had was, number one, be transparent. Let the people of Nebraska know exactly what you're doing. What's interesting about the 16 years that I was there, and quite frankly, if you do count Republicans and Democrats in the unicameral legislature, you'll find that there are a lot more Republicans traditionally than there are Democrats, at least during the 16 years I was there. But I don't think at any time that I was there, any year, any legislative session that I was there, that there were not the equal number of committee chairs, Republican and Democrat. And there was no magic about that. It was just the way we balanced things out in our state. We did it intuitively. We do it intuitively. I don't suggest that we're going to decide tomorrow or even next year or 10 years from now to have a unicameral, bipartisan, nonpartisan legislature. But the lessons that I learned there are the lessons that I have brought here. And when I had the opportunity, Mr. Costa, when I had the opportunity to meet the Blue Dogs, it reminded me of home. It reminded me of the Nebraska legislature. The idea that Republicans and Democrats make that decision for themselves. But as my good friend and former senator from Nebraska, Ed Zorinsky, used to say, is there are no Republican senators or Democrat senators. There are only American senators, U.S. senators. It's in the water in Nebraska. That's how we think. That's how we are. And what's great about this place is those same relationships, those same committed people are there to make those kinds of relationships work in a bipartisan way. And we've heard examples of that today. When I ran for this office, I said to the voters of the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska, Sarpy County and Douglas County, Nebraska, the two most populous counties, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to make 25 friends, because in Nebraska, if you make 25 friends, you get 25 people to vote for a bill, you pass it. It passes. You know what? I found more than 25 friends. I found a lot of friends. A lot of great people who sit in this body, this place, every single day, Republicans and Democrats. I just got back, and then I'll conclude, Mr. Costa. I just got back from a trip to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Jordan, and the Emirates, and Kuwait. And I went with 3 other members. Elise Safranek, who's a freshman member, Republican from New York, Joe Wilson, who is a veteran member from South Carolina, and Seth Moulton, who is a freshman from Massachusetts. What great people. What great committed Americans to have gone on that trip. So, Mr. Speaker, I commend the Blue Dogs to those that are watching, in furtherance of the old Nebraska tradition of transparency and working together and making things happen. Thank you, Mr.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
During your visit on a bipartisan basis in Afghanistan and Iraq and in Jordan, we're visiting some of the most challenging hotspots in the world today. And I suspect you got an opportunity to visit and see American men and women serving abroad and the heroic and difficult jobs that they're doing and the great sacrifices to them and their families. I suspect you had an opportunity to tell them that in Washington we're trying to do all we can to support them.
Thank you for the comment. Yes, and I was fortunate enough to visit with Nebraskans who were serving in Iraq and serving in Afghanistan. And I was on a C-130. We were traveling over the Straits of Hormuz area, and the navigator in the C-130 said to me, "Sir," because he had to call me sir. That's the protocol. He said, "Sir," he said, "you know, get behind us. We're doing the best we can over here, and we need your support." And they're going to get our support and have our support. And thank you for the question, and I was so deeply appreciative of the opportunity to meet with my fellow Nebraskans who were there as well.
Well, I've made that trip several times, and we can never say thank you enough to the American men and women who serve our nation's military. And I would just ask you every week, I know you go back to your district and the good people in Nebraska and that good water you're drinking there, bring more of it here to Washington, because I think if we can drink some more of that water, it certainly wouldn't hurt us here in our nation's capital.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you, sir.
I want to thank the gentleman from Nebraska for his good words. And as I prepare to close, I want to thank my fellow Blue Dog colleagues for coming down to the well of the House of Representatives this afternoon to talk about the common interests that we as Blue Dog Coalition members have, the efforts that we are making to reach across the aisle, the efforts that we are making to work with the No Labels group, as well as others, on a call to service to repair the engagement of civic dialogue, understanding that, frankly, if we tone down our rhetoric and we have a better understanding of how the different congressional districts that we all represent are, that we can find the common threads, the common bonds to bring together solutions that we can agree upon for all of America. After all, we all believe that's why we've been sent here for, I believe, in one way or another. Another effort that the Blue Dog Coalition is engaged in with No Labels and others is congressional reform. Clearly, many Americans, when they look at Washington and they see the news in the evening, they think, geez, there must be something broke there. It ain't working right. It's not working the way we read in our textbooks. And so we're trying to restore efforts in congressional reform in terms of regular order, in terms of our budget process, and producing all 11 budget bills every year, and then go to a conference as we're supposed to do. We haven't done that in 12 years in Congress, whether it's the Democrats in the majority or whether it's the Republicans in the majority. So there's a lot of fixing, and obviously finger pointing doesn't fix the problem. And in addition to that, we have electoral reform. I think we all know that last November, we had the lowest recorded turnout in America since 1942. And what's that tell you? What's that tell you when the majority of Americans, regardless of whether they're registered as Republicans or Democrats, identify themselves as independents? It tells you that America's looking toward people in Washington to provide the leadership to solve problems. They don't expect us to solve all of them. They're not unrealistic, but they'd like us to prioritize on getting a budget on time, getting our fiscal house in order, on trying to fix a broken immigration system, produce a 5-year transportation bill, improve government accountability and transparency. That's what they would like us to work on. As I said when I began earlier this afternoon, I'm Congressman Jim Costa. I represent the 16th Congressional District in California, including all of Merced County, half of the flatland of Madera County, a lot of agriculture in both Merced and Madera counties, and Fresno County. Fresno is, of course, my home, and the wonderful people that are a part of the San Joaquin Valley that I've had the honor and the privilege to represent over the years are what all Americans are like. They're some of the best and the brightest. They're tenacious. They're hardworking. They represent the story of America. What's that story? Immigrants past, immigrants present. People coming from all over the world, striving to have a better life, a better opportunity for themselves and for their families. And that's why we're working to solve the water problems in the San Joaquin Valley. Because if we could solve the water problems in California and in the West, with the planet clicking 7 billion people last year and soon to have 9 billion people by the middle of this century, our solutions to water problems in California can be a template to solving water problems around the world. Because where water flows, food grows. And clearly we know that that is a daunting challenge, just like our energy problems are. But guess what? We're making progress on our energy problems. You know, when I first came to Congress 10 years ago, we imported over 60% of our energy needs. Today, we import a little over 40%. And if we continue on the current path, in the next 10 years, we will be importing around 20% or less by using all the energy tools in our energy toolbox, just as we must use all the energy tools in our water toolbox. I mean, all our water tools in our water toolbox. So there's a lot to do. And I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Blue Dog Coalition for their time today, their continued efforts over the years. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do together, and we want to reach out to work with everybody in the House of Representatives, the People's House. And the Blue Dog Coalition is ready and willing to work with everyone. We look forward to creating bridges, not cul-de-sacs, working with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to advance common sense policies that are fiscally sound, that benefit our entire nation. I mean, you could also call the Blue Dog Coalition the Common Sense Caucus, because we reject the notion of gridlock in Washington. It's embarrassing, it's inexcusable, and every day when we put politics ahead of policy, we put our nation and we stand alone. Therefore, Congress must come together to address the critical issues, as I said before, tax reform, immigration reform, and ways to further our nation's economic recovery. If we work together, there is no problem in America. There is no problem in America if we work together that we cannot solve. We are here to represent and advocate for our constituents. Please, for those of you who enjoyed the comments made by my fellow Blue Dog Coalition members this afternoon, you can go to www.bluedog.schrader.house.gov for more information. The Blue Dog Coalition will continue to work to make a difference by advocating for sound legislation and working together with our colleagues on a bipartisan basis. That's what I have always done. And today, as with my Blue Dog Coalition partners, we have the honor and the privilege to represent our constituents from throughout the land. And I would ask that my colleagues continue to make that effort, because I think at the end of the day, that's what all of our Americans want us to do. I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.